Democratic Environmental Caucus. And we have the pleasure tonight of having Nana Royer to talk about her trips to Cuba, okay, with the Friendship Association of St. Johns County. And just to give a little background to Nana, besides being the secretary of our caucus, she has a BS in biology from the University of Florida, a Master of Education and Counseling from the University of New Hampshire. She was a Peace Corps volunteer in rural community health in the country of Colombia back in the 60s. She's a retired registered nurse. She's co-founder of the St. Augustine Beach Community Garden. She's a master gardener and master naturalist. She has those certifications. And she's an activist for democracy and environmental / social justice. And she's a lover of nature and travel. So she'll put all that background and those skills and present tonight. Thank you, Nana. You're on.
Okay. This presentation, I've got time to about 45 minutes, just so you know. So that's why I'm asking that you hold your questions until the end. Otherwise, we'll go off on a tangent and we'll never be done. So I suggest that you all mute yourselves so that we don't have extraneous noise either. Okay, Cuba can be viewed through different lenses, through their art, their dance, their history, their architecture. The lens that I'm choosing to use this evening is that of the environment and the country's relationship to it. Cuba is roughly the size of Florida, about 750 miles long and up to 150 miles wide. And the area that we're going to be focusing on first is down here in the east. You'll be hearing about the town of Baracoa, right here. Guantanamo, which you've heard of before, Santiago. Cuba has been called the jewel of the Caribbean, and the stakes of environmental protection are high. They have a lot to lose in terms of biodiversity, marine and coastal habitat, and fish populations if they don't do things right moving ahead. Cuba is the most ecologically diverse island in the Caribbean, with more than 10,000 endemic plant and animal species, and endemic simply means that they're found nowhere else in the world. The country's coral reefs span 1,000 square miles and represent 1/3 of all the reefs in the insular Caribbean. They have the healthiest reef system in the Caribbean, and its healthy marine ecosystems are crucial for regional coral larva dispersal and fisheries production that not only benefit the Caribbean region, but also the southeastern United States. And quoting the executive director of the Cuba program at the Nature Conservancy, it's not a secret that Cuba has some of the best preserved land and waters in the Caribbean. It's carefully sought to protect its natural environment over the years, aggressively declaring protected areas. Its commitment to conservation began in 1992, when at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Castro announced that his government would confront the, quote, ecological destruction threatening our planet, unquote. So since then, the government management policies have required the Cuban governments to protect 25% of its marine habitat from development. Just as a comparison, the US has only protected 3 to 5% of its marine habitat. And Cuba's environmental record isn't perfect, however. While its policies look good on paper, implementation has been a mixed bag, according to one authority. The country's aging infrastructure has hurt wastewater treatment, agricultural land suffers from soil erosion, and dams have altered water flows in fragile coastal estuaries. And one zoologist with the Wildlife Conservation Society in New York, who has worked in Cuba for several years, says that although development poses a threat to Cuba's ecology, the nation still stands head and shoulders above anywhere else in the Caribbean in terms of government support for conservation. So that's just a little background about Cuba. Over the past 11 years, beginning in 2009, I've made 5 visits to Cuba, all of them under the aegis of the Friendship Association, which is located in St. Augustine. It was formed in 2000 as a humanitarian people-to-people mission. Soledad Pagliuca, who's with us tonight, has led and managed over 80 delegations, allowing people from across the country to get to know and appreciate Cuba. Under her leadership, relationships with key individuals and organizations, officials, artists, and writers have been formed and nurtured with collaborative work accomplished. Of special significance are the books which have been researched and published under the leadership of Soledad in partnership with Cubans. Books about the environment, the painters of Baracoa, regional cooking, history, culture, endangered species, architecture and archaeology, and even a historical novel. And here we have a map of the protected areas of Cuba. There are 211 protected areas.
I'm going to watch this next one because it's about Apple's putting out a warning about their iPhone and pacemakers.
Someone is not muted. Could you please mute? Thank you. Each of these colored areas represents one type of a protected area. They have natural reserves, national parks, ecological reserves, natural outstanding elements, managed floral reserves, etc. And the red circles indicate the areas which I myself have been to. And these 211 protected areas encompass about 22% of the country's territory, compared to in the US about 12% that's protected. And the percentage of safeguarded environment in Cuba is among the highest of any nation. And my favorite part of the trips which I've made with the Friendship Association have been our visits to these natural and protected areas. The association has a special relationship with the town of Baracoa, one that's located in the extreme eastern part of the island. Similar to St. Augustine, it's the oldest Spanish settlement in the country. They have a large fort built at about the same time as our Castillo de San Marcos, and it has a chocolate factory, which makes us a type of informal sister city. It's located on the Caribbean in a very scenic area surrounded by all this lush vegetation that you see, and right next to the Humboldt National Park, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this park boasts 1,200 animal species, 1,000 plant species, and 80% of these are endemic, found only here in Cuba, and some of them are found only here on the East Coast. And this park holds the most plant density of any place in Cuba and the Caribbean. There are more endemic species here than almost anywhere on the globe. So this is a UNESCO site. This is the visitor center right here, Taco Bay, the first introduction to the park. Some of the vegetation in the park. And we can't go for a hike here without having to cross at least one stream, and usually more than one. And this was a hike that we took back in 2009, I think it was. And this is, as you can tell by the mask, this is a recent trip that we made in December. And this guide is explaining that this type of red clay only supports acid-loving plants, which contributes to the unique diversity of plants in the park. And this is my beloved endangered Polymeta snail. Now, these are very beautiful snails. They come in different colors. They're only found on this part of the island. Here's one coming out of its shell. And their beauty is their downfall, however, because they are collected by the locals to make into necklaces for tourists. So in order to help raise consciousness of the citizens, the Friendship Association came up with this coloring book for the students to help them understand the beauty and the vulnerability of the Polymeta. And this is just one of the coloring books which they have done. And here's one of our hikes out and one of the trails through the park. And here's another collaboration between the Friendship Association, and they actually do this work under the company and Editions Nuevo Mundos right here, but it's all by the Friendship Association. They collaborated with Cuban biologists to come up with this book, Secrets of the Park. The Spanish edition came out a couple of years ago, and the English edition was just recently was published. And in fact, in our trip in December, we picked up 500 copies of the book in the town of Holguin and transported them to Baracoa, to the office of Humboldt Park. And here we are taking them from our tour bus into the office. And this man in the middle is Michael Cañizares. He was the ornithologist that accompanied us on the trip. He was invaluable for helping us learn about nature and the birds and such. And this is one of his sons who's helping bring in the books. And we brought in 500 of them, set them here in the office, half in Spanish, half in English. And the park authorities are encouraged to take the books to their visitor center and have them available for a donation to the park. They can't sell them and we can't sell them, but they can ask for donations, which can go to help maintain the park. It's one of the flowers found in the park. And this was after our hike, a great lunch spread that was put out for us. We never were at a loss for a lot of great food. This was our cook, Maria, and Indio, who was our guide. He's a local from right around the park, and he was trained to be a guide. And in fact, he was one that helped me across one of the streams. And here's one of the rivers, creeks that we crossed, and the two boys took the opportunity to swim. And here we have one of the endangered animals of Cuba, the hutia, rodent-like animal, and they're endangered. It's now illegal to hunt them, although they used to, but the Cubans do like to eat them for food. There are only about 5 mammals that are found on the island, and one of those might be extinct, the solendon. This is a coloring book that was put together by the biologists and the Friendship Association again for distribution to the children, so they can learn what the assets they have on the island. And here we are at the Archaeological Museum in Baracoa. Cave the Paradise. It's a Taino museum. The indigenous people of Cuba were the Tainos. And this cave was created also with the assistance of the Friendship Association. And here we have to climb up a number of steps to get to the cave. Here we are at the front. And inside, it's a funeral cave. So this is where they came to bury their dead, and we were able to climb up a number of steps for a couple of great outlooks. This is a garden that's found right in downtown Baracoa. This photo was from my first trip there 10, 11 years ago. And actually it was one of the sparks that caused me to want to begin a community garden in St. Augustine Beach. This man in his backyard is growing all these vegetables. These lettuce seeds were started here in these old tires. And then after 3 weeks, they were transferred into the garden area right here. And this was kind of new for Cuba because for a long time, you could go there and it was really hard to get a salad. You wouldn't think that given all the land they have, but that was the case. But now it seems to be much easier. Salads are bound at every meal. And here in the backyard, we also found some local fauna. And here is a permaculture setup. The worm castings are used as fertilizer for the plants. And another one of the endangered animals on the island. This day I was taking a walk down to the beach, and suddenly this young boy who wrapped himself up in this cloth came up to me, and he wanted me to see something. So he opened up his cloth, and here was this little Cuban parrot wrapped up, and he wanted to sell it to me. Of course, this is quite illegal. And this is one of the reasons that these birds are becoming endangered. And I was so taken aback by his appearance. I said, oh no, I can't buy it. In fact, you should let it go free. And then later I thought that, gee, I should have just bought it and turned it over to authorities, and then they could have set it free. But this is, apparently he hadn't read the coloring book about the cotorra, the Cuban parrot, another production by the Friendship Association, and again, in collaboration with the local biologists. And this is a protected area, part of Baracoa, where this same day where I ran into the boy with the parrot, I walked out here with a guide I picked up along the way. And this area contains caves. We enter here and walk up into the jungle and along an old Taino trail to caves with Taino pictographs and petroglyphs. Here, another outstanding natural element is in Yumuri Canyon. This is a bit of a drive east of Baracoa, or it's another flora and fauna preserve. And this is where we got on these little boats, and we had a guide who rowed us up the river, and we got out and hiked and swam in the water. This was our trip back on the boat. This little man here in the green, he rowed back all us old ladies back to the beginning. And here on the left is Linda. She is a semi-retired park ranger. She was my roommate on that trip. And Joni Ellis, who started the nonprofit Optics for the Tropics, that brings binoculars, donates binoculars to the biologists on the island who don't have them. After our boat trip, we had this wonderful spread overlooking the water. You can see there's a lot of seafood, the ubiquitous yucca, root vegetable, beans, the tostones, the plátanos that are smashed, a lot of vegetables, very wonderful, wonderful food. And here is a view from the mouth of the Yumuri River of the landmark of Baracoa called El Yunque. And that means in English, the anvil, A-N-V-I-L, because it has the same shape. Okay, now here, the area I've been describing is right here. We're gonna head all the way out here to the easternmost point of my sea, and then head back to Guantanamo and Santiago. And here's the ecological reserve in my sea. The topography is very different. The ecology is more desert-like. Here's right on the ocean. These are the two children of Michael who accompanied us through the whole trip. They're great kids. They speak English very well. They're very smart. And here's the lighthouse that we climbed up to get great views of the ocean. And here's some of the local fauna. And this is just to show that, yes, Cuba does have solar. Its renewable energy output is small, estimated to be at about 4% of its overall production in 2012, but that's almost 10 years ago. So I don't know what the current percentage is, but they have been found more out in the countryside than in the city. And I believe this is the royal palm, which is the national tree of Cuba. And this particular tree is very rare. You don't often see them with two trunks like that. And so we head a bit south along the coast to Guantanamo. This was from the first trip that I was on 11 years ago. And I still remember it as being one of my most favorite stops. This is the central ecological processing center of urban waste. In other words, a recycling center. And this is the story of Irania Martinez Garcia, who transformed this waste dump into a community resource. This is what this recycling center looked like at the beginning. And there's Irania. And the story is, which is a true story, she lost her daughter to leukemia and was convinced that the disease was caused by environmental toxins that came from the burning of plastic and hospital waste in this dump. And so she resolved to turn it into an eco-friendly haven. And the opinion of the town was, no, how could she do that? It's not going to happen. But as it turned out, she helped hundreds of local residents to learn how to grow food efficiently while using organic and sustainable materials from the dump and from their own trash. Now, Irania's idea was to clean up the dump by organizing it into organic and inorganic piles, and then use the organic material to make compost that would be used to plant trees. And the inorganic materials would be stripped down to the core and resold for parts. Now, one of the members of the Friendship Association, Christy Weeks, was so impressed by her that she nominated her for a CNN award, and Irania won the award. This was in the Defending the Planet category, and this was at the first ever CNN Heroes Award in New York, and this was in 2007. She was awarded a $10,000 prize. However, because of US restrictions on travel from Cuba, she wasn't allowed to come and collect it. So in her place, Alberto Jones, who's a resident of Palm Coast and originally from Guantanamo, went to New York to collect the amount in her name. And here are some of the trees that were started here at the Recycle Center. She believed in recycling everything. Here's the original drip system using plastic water bottles. And you can see that the edging of the gardens were made with cattle skulls. So she tried not to let anything go to waste. And you can see all the trees that are planted out here. And there she is in the gardens. Each time we went, when one of our contingents went, we always planted trees, and she had an area called the Friendship Circle. And I don't remember what kind of tree this is, but this is my husband Dave planting his. Now in Guantanamo, we also stopped at the Cultural Center of UNIAC, which is the National Union of Writers and Artists of Cuba. And Soledad has also established very good relationships with the people there. And while we were there, there was a presentation of this mural that was sponsored in part by the Friendship Association. And this is all part of the campaign of freeing caged birds. This is an abstract mural that depicts this great bird who has been working so hard that he has worked himself to the bone, literally, traveling the world to free birds from cages. And there's some mesh here that is symbolic of the cages that they were in. And here they all go flying to their homes. And the story about the birds is that in Cuba, when a family is doing okay economically and they're getting by okay, and it's kind of a prestige symbol to be able to have birds in cages, very much like in the US, but it's also a threat to their beautiful songbirds. So there's a campaign that's been going on, collaborating with the Friendship Association, Optics for the Tropics, and schools and biologists to teach people that they really should not keep their birds in cages. And this is all part of an illegal bird trade. This is one demonstration that we want to, an explanation of the bird trade. You can see the bird is stepped into this plastic bottle. That's his eye that you see right there. And then that bottle is strapped to the person's leg. It's wrapped on, and then the contrabandista walks through the airport into the country with the goal of selling the songbird. Of course, a lot of these birds don't make it. They die in those bottles. So there is an effort to try and control these birds. And so this is a campaign, Mejor Volando, Better Flying, say no to the contraband of wild birds in Cuba. And continuing on with the theme of freeing the wild birds, here we are in Santiago. These are children at a school that are flying kites. And these kites were made by them using pages from this coloring book. And guess who is responsible for these coloring books? It's a friendship association. So another collaborative effort with the teachers in the schools and Optics for the Tropics created this project. And here are Joni and Soledad being interviewed by the local media. This is a mural in, I believe it's Baracoa, along with the same theme, more free, more beautiful, protect them. And this mural is done by Mildo, which is he's one of the most renowned artists in Baracoa, and his depiction of the same theme of freeing the caged birds. Here's just some of the roadside scenery in the area of Santiago. This was a biosphere reserve, Bacanoa, that we arrived in. We were about to climb to the highest point, probably in Cuba, about 4,000 feet high. And it's on top of this great rock. There's 459 steps to the top, and it's believed that it came about as a result of an underwater volcanic explosion. So this is the rock, and here are the steps. I'm taking the photo from up here looking down. When we got to the top, we actually walked down the back. There's another route up. And here's the weather station at the top of Gran Piedra. And this young woman billed herself as president of Gran Piedra, which she has on her sweatshirt. She had been walking up here regularly for 17 years, carrying all these handicrafts that she sells. Of course, now with COVID, the tourist trade was pretty kaput. So she hangs out in her home down at the bottom of the rock. And she actually served us lunch the day that we were there. So she does make a few extra pesos serving some of the tourists. And here is Linda, my roommate, the park ranger, and I. Locals swear that on a clear night, one can even see the gleam of lights coming from the Republic of Haiti out here. And here's on the other side of Gran Piedra, this picture on the left, I just thought they were so cute. I couldn't resist. And this young girl is the daughter of the president of Gran Piedra. You saw her mother in the previous picture. This is at their house where we had lunch, and she's passing out these lilies to each of us. This is a project in the area, which I didn't see myself, but Soledad was a part of, where these children are helping to restore the shoreline by planting mangroves, the same kind of thing we do here. But this was a school project. And you can see the pseudophores of the black mangroves right back here. And so I don't know what kind they're planting here. Okay, we're going to be leaving Santiago area and traveling west up into here and to here. So this is more the south central part of the country. We're going to Las Lomas de Banao, which is another ecological reserve. This is a path that we followed to a beautiful waterfall. In this reserve, there are over 260 endemic species found, many of which are said to be native to the region. And this reserve belongs to the Sancti Spiritus Flora and Fauna Company, whose corporate name is to offer corporate purpose, is to offer services of protection, conservation, and conservation of flora and fauna, in addition to the encouragement of nature tourism And they offer rides, hiking, and jeep safaris as their main tourist products. And here, with the help of Michael, we were able to spot some of the local birds, Western spindalis and the West Indian woodpecker. These are my own photos. I'm always proud when I can get a fairly decent photo of a bird with my little point and shoot. And this tree, I thought was really unique. Here, the two branches have just grown together in an embrace. And here at the same preserve are their gardens. And here is Michael, the ornithologist again. And this, remember, this is an ecological preserve. You should not be keeping and promoting fighting cocks on it. Yet this is part of the Cuban culture, and this is what they do. They still have these cocks in cages, which they save for fighting. Not good, but such is life. And here we are at the Sierra del Chorrillo Managed Resource Area. And it is a privately run place by these people who have horses. Anyway, here's Michael, who is leading us on another bird watching expedition. And he helped us find one of those endangered endemic Cuban parrots here. And here's how they make some money to help run the preserve. They have a number of Morgan horses, as well as Arab and Cuban criollos. The sperm from some of these horses has been sold for large sums in the past, and they also sell the horses. And here north of Sancti Spiritus, where we just were, is Caguanas National Park. And here is a trail that we walked to this cave. This area is characterized by caves, arches, and niches that open to the sea. And we were able to see some bats right here. And the bats are one of the few mammals in Cuba. So now we travel for all the way to the west side of the island to Viñales Valley. This is one of Cuba's most scenic national parks. I really loved it. But I love so much in Cuba. And the outstanding landmarks here are these what are called mogotes. These are vertical limestone elevations which hide caves and hollows. And these rise like islands from the bottom of the valley and can be up to 300 meters high. And they are the remains of limestone hills that have eroded away by slow rainfall about 160 million years ago. Again, this is another UNESCO World Heritage Site. And here's the hotel where we stayed at in Viñales, and shows that how it was powered by solar energy. Our horseback trip out of the valley with Soledad in the lead. And an organic gardening we stopped to take a look at. And here's some of our group aboard our horses. And I took this picture because it's a modest house, but yet look how it has solar panels attached to it. So solar has been used quite a bit in the country, Campo. And here, this is the land, this valley, the land of the best Cuban tobacco, Cuba's signature crop. And you'd see Che most anywhere, especially on shirts that are designed for tourists and caps. Here's the tobacco curing barn. And so we travel from Viñales east to this big area here. This is the Zapata Peninsula. also called the Zapata Swamp. And this is the largest Cuban biosphere reserve. It encompasses the entirety of the peninsula, and it operates on it's over 1,600 square miles, and operates on a budget of about $1 million US dollars with 87 staff. And some of these professional biologists make less than $30 a month. So with such limited internal monies and severe restrictions on visits from wealthy US ecotourists, the protected areas need to do their own fundraising. And some of them have discovered novel ways to bring in much needed cash, such as, for example, on a previous reserve where they sell horses and horse sperm. And this peninsula is wild and largely untouched. It's a big attraction. One of the big attractions is birding on this area because there's such a multitude. And we have two great birders here in this photo. Here's Susanna, my roommate at the time. And here's Paul Beisch, who came along on the trip, who is an ornithologist. And over here is Nils Navarro. He's a very well-known ornithologist in Cuba. And he wrote this book, Endemic Birds of Cuba. And guess what? It's published also by the Friendship Association in collaboration with Nils. And here we have the Cuban toady on his shirt, which is endemic to Cuba. This is a trip out to Finquita Los Pintines, Freckles. These saddles we carried in duffel bags. We swept them through the airport and into our bus and to this finca, the people who owned it. And so as gifts to them, we gave them the saddles along with a copy of Nils Navarro's book on endemic birds. And here we are off on another trip for bird watching in a swamp environment. Oh, and on this trip, incidentally, the horse upon which I was riding, we were stopped in one area looking at birds, and all of a sudden my horse decides it wants to lie down, and I was still on it. So she just let herself gently to the ground, and I was able to jump off in plenty of time, but that was a first for me. And here's an agroecological finca that we visited with biologist Rosendo, who was with us quite a bit at the time. These are the two owners of the farm. They have a new sign. And agroecology is a term it means farming that centers on food production that makes the best use of nature's goods and services while not damaging those resources. So it's related to organic gardening. And here you probably hear it called permaculture. And these techniques played an important role in alleviating the food crisis in Cuba following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. It was in the 1990s, the so-called special period when the Soviet Union pulled out. They also pulled out their oil, which meant, and other necessities. So Cuba had to learn how to function on very little oil. So they had no commercial fertilizer available. So they had to turn to organic methods or agroecology. And at this finca, this just shows how some of the things that they recycle for our glasses, bamboo. And Eddie, the owner, was very proud of his secret weapon, which is his compost, which he uses to make gardens like this. And he said that some of his neighbors had kind of teased him about not using commercial fertilizers and said they thought that he couldn't do it without, but he has definitely shown that you can. And here we take a walk to a small but imposing cenote, which in Florida are called sinkholes. It's 72 meters deep or over 200 feet. And in the same area, we found, with Paul Beisch's help, because he scattered rice and these came running out, the endemic endangered blue-headed quail dove. I guess they're not too easy to find. They're only in very special places like this area near the caves. Then we took a ride out to Las Salinas Peninsula. We're still in the Zapata Swamp, but this area is, I guess you call, salt flats. And we drove out here to saw a flock of flamingos. And here we are up on the observation deck looking out on the flats. These are some of the birds that we spotted. The Cuban blackhawk endemic. There's the brown pelican. We have the white pelican here. The flamingo. Here's a good view of the peninsula's waterways. And here, this just shows how the biologists here run educational programs for children to help instill the conservation ethic in the next generation. And you see that the coloring books that they're using were the ones that were donated and produced by the Friendship Association. This was a wonderful place to go. This is one person's backyard who turned what was originally an annoyance that people wanted to see his yard into a tourist attraction. Birders would come from all over and tromp off into the woods looking for these rare birds, and he had them right in his backyard. So here we have the zunzuncito, also called the bee hummingbird. At 2.5 inches, is the smallest bird in the world and only found here in Cuba. This bird feeder is a donation by the Friendship Association. And here is Mr. Hernandez with the hummingbird on his shirt. Also in his yard is the emerald hummingbird. It's not endemic to Cuba, also found in the Bahamas, but it's, I believe, that one and the zunzuncito, the bee hummingbird, I think those are the two only ones on the island, I believe. And here we have a juvenile Cuban oriole. I hope this is the right name. And this photograph is by Michael Cañizares, the ornithologist who accompanied us. Not only is he a great biologist, he's a wonderful photographer. And this is a picture of the Cuban trogon, the national bird of Cuba. And it's the national bird because it has the colors of the Cuban flag. This is just a couple shots in Havana. This is known as the forest of Havana. Dave and I went on a taxi ride and we stopped here to take a look at it. And this is just a Havana City Park. So there was always greenery to be found. And here we are in one of my favorite places also, the ruins of the coffee plantation in Girona, a national monument. These ruins, or the plantation, was built in the 1800s by a German, Cornelio, who made various innovations to the plantation. He was very much envied by the people who lived around him, the other coffee plantation owners. And here are the ruins of the main house. And this is Soledad standing here. And she's standing where originally there was a statue, a Roman statue, Angerona, who was the goddess of silence. And you see that she has her index finger over her lips, because what happens here in Angerona stays here. They wanted things kept quiet. They didn't want people to know what was going on, because what could have been going on, has been speculated, was that the German Cornelius was having a long-term relationship with his beautiful Haitian owner, Ursula. Her house was here, and he hired her to overlook much of the running of the plantation. And he had about 400 slaves, and the slaves were better taken care of than on other plantations, and it was largely due to the fact that she was the overseer herself. She was Haitian. So the curator of this coffee plantation, Mr. Bourbon, he's been working there for some time. He felt he kind of absorbed the vibes of the place, wrote a novel called The Virtue of Silence. And here he is with the book. This was also new to him. The book has just been recently written and published again by the Friendship Association. And this was the first time he had actually seen the published edition. And here we are planting a tree here. There's Joni, and the young man in back is Camilo, who was the graphic designer of the book. There's Borbón and Ira, the photographer of the interior of the book. And one of the innovations of Cornelia was the cistern. And here we're traveling by sugarcane in bloom and ready for harvest, which was quite beautiful. Caves in Matanzas. Matanzas is a town in the northern coast of Cuba called the Athens of Cuba. These took a walk through these caves, which were originally underwater. And I believe it said that a large part of Matanzas is on top of caves. This is a walk through a garden it's called Havana Biological Gardens, Botanical Gardens, rather. This is a botanical garden in the town of Cienfuegos. It was established in about 1901 by a sugar cane baron from, I think, from Massachusetts. He transplanted tropical trees here from all over the world. And this is just a little poster showing that even the Cubans say, notice to say, remember to ask for no straws, please. And that is the end.
Well, thank you, Nana. That was very good. Appreciate it. Any questions for Nana? Dave?
Okay, I just opened up the chat, so you can unmute yourselves and you can chat if you wish.
Don't forget to unmute yourselves. Like I usually don't.
Did you see any baseball games?
Is that a new hands up, Briggs, or is that still a hands up from before?
Good, hands up. Okay. Thank you, Nana. It was a very fantastic presentation.
But Nana, getting back to Rich's question, did you see any baseball games or go by any
Baseball
where
games?
they were playing?
No, we weren't doing baseball.
Okay. Maybe just if you drove by someplace. So I assume you weren't in any cities. So you didn't see those, I see pictures of people driving around in those repaired 1950s,
Yeah,
60s cars.
Yeah, that's a whole other aspect of Cuba. And
Yeah.
and I just stayed away from all of that because
Okay.
that's a
Okay,
whole,
no,
this was
Oh, yeah.
about the environment.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, I just thought maybe you landed in a, I didn't know your itinerary. I thought maybe you had just passed through, a town or a city.
I could do a whole presentation on the cities in Havana.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah. So we would see the 50s cars there, I
Yeah,
guess.
we have lots of pictures of that.
Okay. Well, I think that would be good. Anyway, any more questions?